I work in product design and just came back from a week in Hawaii. Sunshine, bad ukulele covers, way too many poke bowls. It was the first real break I'd taken in 2 years. The trip was supposed to be restorative. I packed one carry-on, a paperback that I didn't read, and a head full of small, manageable life plans. Chief among them, take my dream car for a proper long drive when I got back. I'd been saving up for it for a long time. The car wasn't just a status symbol. It was a thing I'd fantasized about since I was 12, sketched in the margins of notebooks, and promised myself I'd never let anyone trade or pawn it away. It's the sort of car that costs in the hundreds of thousands if you're doing it right. Rare, hand-finished, and forever wrong for parking garages. I'll spare the exact model name for now because I don't want this to read like flexing. Just know it's one of those cars people point at and whisper, "Wow," when it idles by. So I land, sweaty and carrying a suitcase that smells faintly of sunscreen. And the first thing I notice is the driveway looks wrong. The parking spot where my car lives, not lives like it's some appliance, but lives, like a pet or a stubborn houseplant that only thrives with attention, is empty. There's a glossy rectangle of gravel and a faint tire mark where it's been for months. My parents are sitting on the front steps like they're waiting for me to be the reasonable one, the one who forgives. "Hey, baby, you're back. How was the..." My mom starts, waving at me like I've come home from a routine grocery run. "Where's the car?" I say it nicer than I feel, because I'm already practicing breathing exercises. "Oh, we sold it," my dad says. He says it like he's talking about a lamp. Sold it. For $25,000. I laughed at first because my brain refused to make the vowel sounds line up with reality. 25,000? I said. "Are you..." "It was just sitting there," my mom says. "You haven't driven it in months." "It's my car," I said. "I told you, I was saving up for it for years. Why would you sell my car?" Silence. Then Dad clears his throat like he's rearranging his words into something softer. "Kate needed help. Her spa is finally taking off and she was short. We helped her out." This is where the fog lifted and I could see the outline of the full thing. Kate, my older sister, has been doing the self-healing spa thing for a while. She paints crystals, charges them in moonlight, runs weekend retreats where you pay more than your monthly rent to breathe and cry for 6 hours, and calls it work. I have always been cautiously supportive of her finding her path. But we are not talking about a Tupperware-level investment here. The spa's operating costs? Sure. Marketing? Fine. But $25,000 for a rebrand or a retreat? Unless Kate purchased a literal rainforest and a guru on a private jet, it didn't compute. How much was the car worth? I asked. Not the sentimental value, not the "this is mine" value. The real value. I didn't want hand-wavy numbers. I wanted the cold, cruel figure. "It wasn't being used," Dad repeated. "You weren't even home. The buyer paid cash. We thought it was the practical thing." He leaned back like he'd delivered a home-cooked truth. I could feel the color drain out of the world in slow sepia tones. Practical. That word is a hammer in their vocabulary. Practical means do something you'd never do to your own property if you were the person who loved it. Practical means we solved a problem by solving the wrong problem. I asked for a paper trail. I wanted the bill of sale, the contact details of the buyer, the payment receipt, anything. They had a crumpled email printed out that, if it were an artwork, would be abstract at best. It said, "Sale completed. $25,000 received. Vehicle transferred. No signatures, no notarized form, no verification from me, nothing that said my consent had been involved. Just an assertion that the transfer had happened and someone had cash in hand." I opened every door in the house with a trembling hand like a detective in a really sleepy procedural. No spare key, no hidden set, no car. The garage smelled faintly of old oil and my mother's lavender sachets. I dug through boxes of college memorabilia because I wanted to find something that tied my adult life to my childhood. A ticket stub, a Polaroid, anything that explained why this car was a part of my skeleton. Of course, it wasn't rational. It was not a family heirloom. It wasn't my grandmother's ring. It was a car. But it was also everything I had quietly told myself I would do for myself. I had worked nights, given up frivolities, said no to apartments that would have had prettier windows but wouldn't let me save. My ownership was a ledger of small sacrifices. an accumulation of deliberately choosing this pleasure over other things. To have it converted into someone else's spa cash felt like the ledger had been erased. "Kate called?" I asked, because this felt like the only sane next step. My parents exchanged a look. "She was very grateful," my mom said. "She said she'd never forget it. We all did what we thought was best." "Best for whom?" I said too loud, which was against my own rules about tone. They winced like I'd touched a hot plate. Kate's self-healing spa is apparently not just a hobby. She's done retreats in different towns. She has an Instagram that looks like a pastel fever dream, candles lined up like a very judgmental choir. She's also, to be fair, struggled a little with money. She asked my parents for a loan. They decided, collectively, to give her more than a loan, because giving money to a child is different than giving it to an adult, especially when the child is your chosen, polished brand of struggling artist. My parents are spenders of generosity framed as moral obligation. It's one of the things I love and am furious about. They're the sort of good people who give the last slice of pie and then convince themselves they did no such thing. I tried to argue the numbers with them. "You sold an asset for a fraction of its market value," I said. "You didn't consult me. You don't get to liquidate something I own because it's inconveniently parked." My voice is usually measured. This was not measured. It was a raw, cracked thing that startled even me. Dad's defense was the textbook of rationalization. "It depreciates when it sits, Marie. There's maintenance, insurance. We did the math." He actually had charts on his phone. Excel, sometimes the enemy of nuance. He kept repeating practical with the weary inflection of a person tired of justifying themselves. My mom kept saying, "We were trying to help Kate." I sat down on the steps and laughed once, high and small, because the universe was making me act out of character. Helped her with what exactly? $48,000? A private chef? A singing bowl? I didn't have the strength to be kind. "You still have your job," my mom said. "You can replace it." I know they meant it in a loving way. Replaceability is a kind of love in their house. Resources can fix problems, but replaceability is not the same as respect. There's a difference between giving someone the means to move forward and erasing the story that got them there. I didn't sleep that night, not because I wanted to stay awake mulling revenge, but because the idea that my parents looked at my life and treated one of the things I most carefully built as disposable was unbearable. I called my sister. Her voice was warm and a little sheepish, like someone apologizing in advance for cutting a cake without asking who the birthday person is. "I'm so sorry if you're upset," she said, and I could hear the background. Incense, a calming playlist, group breathes, guided meditations. I really needed that capital, Marie. We had so many bookings lined up, and this retreat would really solidify everything. "So you bought my car with it?" I wanted to hurt her in words only, sharp and precise. "It was your parents' decision," she replied. "They offered, and I accepted because I trusted them. I didn't know you'd be back so soon." I wasn't supposed to be back? Did I die? I could feel tears building, not theatrical, but the honest kind that come when something you valued is translated into a line item on someone else's spreadsheet. This is where the betrayal sits. Not just the act, but the explanation. If they had called me and asked me if they could help Kate in some other way, maybe I would have said yes. Maybe I would have offered a loan myself. But the unilateral decision, the "it was just sitting there" dismissal, turned my car into a noun without an owner. Suddenly my life's small architecture, what I'd sacrificed for, was rearranged by people who thought they were inflicting kindness. Over the next few days, I did what people do when trying to be rational. I emailed DMV. I called my insurance. I messaged the dealership. There were gaps. The sale was registered in some places, but other records were fuzzy. The more I dug, the more I felt like I was assembling a puzzle where the final piece had been hidden in the cushions, and someone had pretended it never existed. I kept thinking about the car's details, the thumbprint of the handcrafted steering wheel, the sound it made when I turned the key, which, yes, I only had for short, ecstatic drives, the way the sun hit the leather when I left it outside. Material things collect memory in odd ways. The smell of a car can be a time machine. It was not just a car to me. To them, it was inconvenient, depreciating, and useful as cash. My friends had mixed reactions. Some were furious on my behalf. Others tried to console me with logistics. Could I sue? Was there a legal case if the registration had been transferred without my consent? That legal thread felt slippery, as if justice was tied up in legalese, while the person who'd been wronged was the only one left out of the meeting. I spent an evening rereading old messages to myself, notes where I'd gleefully promised to take the car out for a cross-country drive, photos of me leaning against it at dusk, receipts for the small, obsessive maintenance I'd paid for. All of it felt like a will that someone else had ignored. I tried having calm conversations. I told my parents that selling my property without my permission felt like a violation. My mother blinked, like the word violation was too strong. My father sighed, like this was the end of a complicated chapter. There was an apology that read like a compromise. We should have told you. We're sorry. Not we did wrong. Not we will fix this. An apology that was more of a bandwidth reallocation. And yet, and here's where the resentment starts to solidify into something colder, when I expressed anger, when I asked for restitution beyond sorry, the conversational machinery slipped into two familiar grooves. One, the moral high ground of generosity. We were helping Kate. And two, the practical indignation at my emotional reaction. You can replace it, Marie. Why not just save again? It's like being told a favorite book has been used as firewood, and then being asked to be grateful the chapters were warm for a while. Mike took it exactly the way I expected a cool, practical lawyer brother to take it, with equal parts eye roll and inefficiently folded sympathy. He came over 2 days after my kitchen table fortress was built, carrying a black coffee like it might steady his hands, and sat across from me at the counter like this was going to be an office consultation and not a family hostage negotiation. "You can sue them," he said immediately, like a man naming an obvious dessert. "But I'm not going to sue them." "Why?" I asked. I had rehearsed this question until my voice was a scalpel. Mike put his mug down, squared his shoulders, and did that lawyer thing where he explained morality like a statute. "Because it'd be weird," he said. "It's your parents. Even if you win a judgment and lose Christmases. People do crazy things in court. You don't want every holiday dinner to end with me reading depositions out loud." He smiled the way he always does when he's defusing a family grenade. A slow, careful smile that says he's already calculated the fallout and chosen not to press the button. He refused to be my gladiator. He wouldn't take the case because he knew the emotional cost would outstrip the practical gain. That would have been an easy, wholesome, brotherly refusal if it weren't also mildly enraging. Like being told you can't have dessert because your brother is afraid of cavities. But Mike is a good lawyer in other ways. With the refusal came the thing I actually needed: strategy. He turned into the kind of helpful that doesn't bill by the hour. "Document everything," he said. "VIN numbers, photos, texts, emails. Make the narrative airtight. Track the chain of custody on that sale. If there's anything sloppy, and there always is, it gives you leverage. Call the buyer. Be polite. If the buyer bought in good faith, they can return it and get their money back. If they won't, a well-drafted demand letter works wonders. And for God's sake, don't yell at mom in the heat of it. Be a mirror. People can't stand their own face reflected back when it's ugly." "Mirror them?" I said, incredulous and a little bitter. "You want me to be soothing and reasonable to the people who sold my car behind my back into a bowl of crystals?" "It's negotiation psychology," he said. "Also, convenience. Threatening litigation is a blunt instrument. It'll get stuff done, but it leaves scars. If you can get the car back without turning the family into a living law school case study, do it." So I did the boring, lawyer-adjacent things first, because boring paperwork is a kind of quietly satisfying revenge. I pulled up the old registration photos I'd taken when I'd bought the car. The one of me and the car at dusk, with the weird streetlight halo where I looked like a cliché protagonist in a coming-of-age film, and cross-referenced the VIN with the DMV. I printed maintenance receipts. I made a folder that, if it were a person, would be the sort of person who has backup plans for their backup plans. The sale paperwork my parents had produced, sloppy. The buyer's name was on it, but there were gaps where a legitimate transfer should have had lines. The signature looked real enough at a glance, but the bill of sale had no notarization, no proof the seller had authority to transfer the vehicle. There was a slip that said cash changed hands, and that was it. Not illegal on its face, necessarily, but it smelled of haste. Mike drafted a short, impossibly crisp letter, absolutely no bluster, which I loved, and told me to call the buyer first with the exact words he'd written. "Phone call, then letter," he said. Be human on the phone. Save the letter as leverage if the person refuses. Don't make the buyer the enemy. They're just someone who thought they were getting a deal. The buyer's name was Lila. Her email was on the crumpled receipt. The first time I called, my throat was gravel, but I forced a calm voice. "Hi, Leela. This is Marie. I think you bought my car." She was confused in the sweetest way. "Oh my God, I am so sorry. I didn't know. I thought it was fully sold by the owners. I paid cash because it was immediate and the seller seemed urgent." That "seemed urgent" was the key. Lila had, it turned out, bought the car from my parents through an intermediary, a used car broker who'd come with a small stack of cash and an air of hurry. She loved the car. She'd driven it for a week with the windows down and posted one slightly embarrassed selfie. New toy, learning to love these curves. And then the world had moved on. She'd put down $25,000 because she had savings and wanted to finally stop obsessing from afar. When I told her the story, something shifted in her voice. It wasn't legalistic concern. It was human decency. "I don't want to be part of a theft," she said. "If you prove it's yours, I'll return it. I paid in good faith." We met the next morning at a coffee shop with too many succulents. Lila was exactly as she'd sounded on the phone. Warm, practical, and oddly relieved to have been pulled into the light. She reached across the table and handed me the receipt I'd never been given, her copy of the bill of sale with the broker's name on it and a ton of small apologetic scribbles. "You were the rightful owner," she said simply. "I'll hand it back, but I couldn't just give it up without someone covering my expenses. I'm not asking for a profit. I just want to be made whole." This is where Mike's advice really mattered. Don't be shy about making the wrong party whole before you go after the original wrongdoers. It's cleaner, faster, and preserves moral standing. Lila wanted her money back. I wanted my car. So we negotiated like two rational people who both loved the same shiny thing for different reasons. I asked Lila for time to present the evidence to my parents and get them to reimburse her. Lila, bless her, agreed to hold the car's title in abeyance if I could secure a written promise. I got Mike to draft an agreement for Lila, a simple clause that she would retransfer the title once she had a refund from the sellers, and a commitment that she wouldn't sell the car in the interim. It was the legal equivalent of asking someone to hold onto your dog while you go to the bank. And she was game. Then I called my parents and said the words I hadn't said in the heat of the first argument. "You sold my car without my permission? Lila will return it once she's reimbursed. She wants to be repaid in full. If you don't reimburse her, I will file a claim and she will contest the sale. That will make everyone's life uncomfortable." That sentence, arranged into its minimalist geometry by Mike, landed like a summoning charm. Mom started with a long string of apologies that were starting to sound like rituals. Dad's throat made that clearing sound again. I could tell they were weighing options. Oh, pay up and be done, or dig in and risk public legal embarrassment. "They can afford this," I said quietly when they tried the "we'll figure it out later" dance. "I know you. Kate, too. You can handle it. It's not about money. It's about making the right choice." There's a weird value calculus that comes with being baldly practical. My parents could absolutely afford $25,000. They'd written checks for vacations I'll never go on, had a garden that looked like a Versailles boutique, and gave to causes I'd roll my eyes at and then quietly admire. They were not poor people making a bad choice out of necessity. They were people who made a bad choice out of misguided benevolence, and now the math on that choice was crystalline and plain. So they paid. They wrote the check to Lila, who accepted it with the same kind of soft dignity she'd shown me in the coffee shop. The car was retitled in my name within days. The broker, it turned out, had been paid by Mom and Dad and vanished like a bad idea with cash in his hand. Mike called it a transaction with shoddy chain of title. and then, magnanimously, refused to file an actual suit. The check cleared, Lila got her money, and my driveway once again had that odd familiar indentation of rubber and memory. But there was a second ledger to balance. Reimbursing Lila didn't make the underlying problem, the $25,000 that had been funneled into Kate's spa, disappear. I wanted the car back, sure, but the moral completion felt unfinished, unless the people who had knowingly redirected my property made the financial choice to actually support Kate with their own money instead of turning my stuff into her capital. That was when I executed the other half of the plan. Not a legal hack so much as a social and practical squeeze. Mike had advised me to make a clean demand with a deadline and to make sure my parents knew that the alternative was ineffective theater, protracted legal disputes, the awkwardness of forced mediations, and the sort of family-wide embarrassment older people hate because it interferes with social standing. I sat them down with zero theatrics. This time I was efficient, clinical even. You sold my car. You repaid Lila. Kate got $25,000. It would be simple and fair if you paid that $25,000 back to Kate directly as a loan or gift if you think she needs it. Or you can take on the cost of her retreat, the thing you funded, because you chose to fund it with my property. The choice is yours. Make Kate whole with your own accounts, or I will consider legal avenues that will not be pleasant. There was a pause like a film rewinding. My dad's mouth opened and closed. My mother's hands trembled around a mug. They chose the thing I predicted. They paid Kate back. They wrote a check large enough that when Kate went to her relaunch with another batch of sage and salt, she would not have spent a cent of my car's value. In practical terms, that meant the spa trip was now on my parents' tab, because they had, in effect, used my car's value to seed it and then chose to correct the accounting with their own funds. My parents were quiet for a week after that, apologetic but not broken. I accepted their apologies without greeting them like a martyr. I was glad, because there's virtue in being efficient about revenge. It's less satisfying if it bankrupts people who genuinely love in their own mangled way, but it still enforces accountability. And Lila? She and I became friends in a low-key way that surprised us both. We started with coffee and the kind of brutal honesty that only two people who'd been confused about a shiny object can share. She loves the car in a different way than I do, not as a shrine to years of delayed gratifications, but as something that made her feel alive on long highways. She took me for a drive the first weekend after the title change, and we leaned into the comfortable silence of people who'd been on opposite sides of a mishap and ended up allies. I hated feeling like I'd been duped, Lila said once as the car purred along a back road, but I also hated thinking I did something wrong. It felt good to make it right. It felt good to get it back, I said, and good to have it not be an argument anymore. What did you do to make your parents pay? She asked, half amused, half conspiratorial. I shrugged. Mostly logistics and a little intentional pressure. Wanting people to do the humane thing is underrated as a tactic. She laughed, and the sound was light enough to make the leather smell new again. As for my family's dynamic after all this, it was, predictably, messy. There were awkward apologies, and everyone pretended they weren't paying attention at gatherings. But the big change was quieter. My parents asked before they moved things that were mine. They learned, I hope, that "we were helping" is not an umbrella that covers taking other people's stuff. Kate's spa is still a pastel dream on Instagram. She's still doing retreats and singing bowls and calling it work. My parents visit her and hand over the train ticket like they're supporting their child. I don't interfere, because I didn't want to be the person who micromanages other adults' mistakes, just the person who redraws the lines where those mistakes cross into theft. Did I feel guilty? For a minute, when the dust settled and the house was oddly quiet, a half-formed Shakespearean self-swill, was I too harsh? Floated through me. But then I remembered that the car had been mine, that my parents had turned my thing into a means to an end without my consent, and that they could absolutely afford to make that wrong right. I remembered Lila's face when she handed over the receipt and how relieved she was to not be embroiled in a family feud. I remembered Mike's advice. Be precise, be human, and don't escalate unless you have to. So the ending is as tidy as life allows. I have my car. It smells like new upholstery and low register satisfaction. Lila and I text about road tripping playlists. My parents are slightly humbled and slightly mortified, but they've paid for their choice. Kate is funded and happy and currently hawking a sound bath that will retune your chakras for a fee. We still have family dinners. We still argue about small things. And we still love each other, which is not a repair so much as a continuing commitment to living in proximity with people who are imperfect. I guess the moral, without sounding like a sermon, is that people mean well and they also have bad judgment. Asking for what's yours clearly and calmly is not vengeance, it's boundary maintenance. My parents got a clear boundary. Lila got her money back. Kate got the capital she wanted, but my parents paid for it this time, not my car. And me? I drive my car on Sundays when no one's watching and pretend the leather is telling me small, approving truths. The revenge part wasn't dramatic fireworks. It was a set of crisp, efficient choices that put the responsibility back where it belonged. That's the thing about grown-up revenge. It's less cathartic and more useful.